England! Yes, into the final of the European Championships. What a joy for a country of people desperate to taste just a modicum of victory. Can't wait for Sunday. It's going to be very exciting, isn't it? But they will be facing a feisty, incredible, attractive, terrifying team from España, Spain, in the local tongue. No, the other way around. You know what I'm saying. I'm very excited for Sunday. We're here today to talk about what happened last night. England's victory against the Netherlands. We're going to touch on Spain beating France, and also a little look ahead to that final. Who do we think will be playing? What do we think it's going to look like? How many times am I going to go to the toilet that day? That's the main question on my mind. But I'm joined by JJ Bull to discuss that.
Hello.
And Jon Mackenzie, another friend of the toilet, to discuss that.
Hello also.
We're all friends of the toilet. Nobody dislikes the toilet. It's a live stream. Now,
if you put googly eyes on the toilet, it would take on all sorts of new meanings.
It would. I would feel I would have to face it, though. That's very confusing. Now, listen, don't derail me with more toilets. I've already derailed myself long enough. Let's begin with England, of course, Jon, because to many, the first 45 minutes of yesterday against the Netherlands was where they looked the most dangerous, perhaps the most impressive so far. I think there are a number of reasons for that, weren't there? What did you make of their performance yesterday, and why do you think it was heralded in the way that it has been?
Yeah, there's lots of questions after yesterday about whether or not England are getting better through the tournament. I think after the group stages and the first knockout stage, there was lots of people questioning what was going on. But then I guess people would say that the result against Switzerland was maybe a little bit more promising. And then 45 minutes, as you say, yesterday, where actually it looked as though England were the better side before various things happened. But I've got the underlying numbers here on a viz. This is from The Athletic, just showing you this is non-penalty expected goals for and against for England. 4 in blue and red is against. And as you can see, like a lot of these games are pretty unimpressive, especially given some of the opponents that are being played against here. I mean, putting up 2.2 expected goals against Slovakia is pretty ridiculous. So in some respects,
some would call it a football Houdini.
yeah. I mean, they got away with it in that game. Arguably got away with it in the Switzerland game, and then they scored again at the death yesterday. Yeah. They are getting their moments in, but obviously the defensive performances are getting better. But it does seem as though there is a correlation between England having to put up less expected goals for if they're going to put up less expected goals against. So I think there's, in terms of the overall tournament itself. I would say that actually in most of the games England have been fairly level and things have just toppled over for them one way or the other. But yesterday's game I thought was really interesting because first half, second half, it was a tale of two halves, right?
Yeah, it was.
And it was, I think, endemic of the big questions about what the issues for England are.
Yeah. In
the first half they were able to do things that they haven't really been able to do in any kind of consistent way in the other games. And then in the second half something changed which stopped them from being able to do that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the Dutch out-of-possession aspect played into that. Because the Dutch, I think, got the out-of-possession approach in the first half completely wrong, and it really played into England's hands. They were able to exploit that. They were able to actually come down from being a goal down and get back into the game. So this is just a still from early on in the first half. I just want to point out a couple of things that were happening. One of them was that in the midfield, the Dutch were going player for player. So you can see on this screenshot here, the 3 Dutch midfielders are tight on their players. So I've circled Phil Foden and Tijani Reinders. We've also got Schouten on the other side with Jude Bellingham. And then further forward, you've got, I think that's Xavi Simons on Kobbie Mainoo. What I wanted to show by circling Phil Foden in particular is just the extent to which Reinders is going to follow him everywhere around the field. So this is the first shot we've got. If I fast forward 7 seconds, Foden's gone all the way across the other side of the field, received the ball in a pass, and Reinders has gone all the way from
Wouldn't you know it, he's still there. Like glue.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So very, very obvious man-to-man marking in this sort of situation. And what that does, obviously, is it leaves this space open where they were before. So that in 7 seconds' time, if we come back the other way, England play it around the Dutch block. Walker receives the ball. He's pushed on by Gakpo, but then you end up with this massive space behind where Rangers was before. Mainoo has taken up that space, and actually the ball goes to Saka first, but then ends up at Mainoo's feet as well.
I don't want to derail you because I know that thought flow state,
but I will.
But I have done already. When you look at that image there, does it look a little bit to you with the second circle that if the players walked into the centre circle, they'd fall into a hole? Do you know what I mean?
It looks exactly like that.
That's what I was thinking about falling into a big hole.
And falling into a big hole is what the Dutch did.
Oh, look at that! Go on, yeah, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
So the man-to-man marking, it caused lots of problems, and part of the problem, the other problems that ensued actually, I might have got some other screenshots. Yeah, one of the other problems that ensued is that when the Dutch midfield were pulled apart by England, so I've got the three Dutch midfielders here circled, and you can see that none of them are in the sort of situation or position on the field where you might expect a midfielder to be. I've circled Harry Kane here because what actually ends up happening a lot of the time is that England, once they've created that space, they're then able to exploit it by dropping a player into that space. Kane drops into that space. He's actually followed by Van Dijk initially in just a few seconds before this clip, but you can see Phil Foden has taken up a really dangerous position in between the two, well, the fullback and the central midfielder here, and it's the fullback, the two centre backs. No, let me get this straight.
John, it's live. It's live, John.
Yeah, I know. I'm having a nightmare.
Go on.
Van Dijk is the centre-back. We've got Ake, who's the full-back. So between the centre-back and the full-back, Foden takes up that space, so Van Dijk drops to cover that, which is dangerous. What that means is that Harry Kane has the run of the midfield. So again, England able to create space really easily because of that man-to-man marking, and then able to drop players in because if you're midfielder man marking, you can't have your back line man marking in the same way because it's going to open up spaces that can be exploited.
And I guess England have flexible players in terms of where they are, so they can make use of this, right?
Absolutely. I've just got one other example from the first half of something that England did really well, and we're going to talk about the tactical shifts that happen in the game as well. One of the shifts that happens is that England start off building with a 3, and I think Gareth Southgate said they realised that they didn't need to do that because of the way the Dutch were pressing in the first half. So what they started doing then was pushing Kyle Walker really high up the field. You can see him here. He's the guy with the arrow above his head. And one of the reasons why they've done that is because, again, it makes it easier to be able to exploit the space that you're creating. So, again, I highlighted the 3 central midfielders, all tight to their opponents, their direct opponents. It creates space in the middle which can be exploited. The ball is going to be with John Stones. The ball is at his feet. I think you just can't see it there. Memphis Depay with his headband on is coming towards it. He's going to close that, and that's going to just open up a huge amount of space in the middle here. Now, because they pushed Kyle Walker up alongside Saka, there's an issue for the Dutch because you now have a 2v1 on that back line around Nathan Ake. Nathan Ake isn't going to push up with Saka because that's just going to leave Walker in loads of space. And so what you can see here already, Ake's like, I'm going across. Someone has to cover this space, but we've got Gakpo over here covering Foden. That space is really open. Bukayo Saka drops into it, picks it up, and is able to exploit it. So in the first half, the fact that the Dutch were so man-to-man and the fact that it led to other problems all around the field. There were other issues as well. I'd say that Daniel Marlon and Denzel Dumfries on the other side were really confused about who was supposed to pick up who where. So if you actually go back and watch the run-up before the penalty, there's a situation where they both track the same man and it leaves someone in just acres of space. So the out of possession was a nightmare. England exploited it really well in the first half, and that's why they looked so much more dangerous.
It's that they got that wrong, because I think the other teams England have played would press a little bit higher and try and stop, put fake pressure on the centre backs rather than just marking the midfielders. Because if you're marking those midfielders, in theory, you can't get the ball from defence to them, so you're trying to push the defenders out. So maybe they're trying to hit them in transition was maybe the idea from the very start, but it kind of played into what England wanted to do and gave them more opportunities to keep the ball.
I think it's more to do with the structure. England have struggled against teams that have had really strong defensive structure, particularly in mid-bot phases, because they struggle to move the ball through the centre of the pitch. And
Slovenia,
if you do that,
for example,
exactly. And if you do that, then you end up inevitably playing the ball around the block, which is why you end up with a lot of U-shape. People talk about it all the time, that U-shape passing that we've seen throughout Southgate's career. In this situation, because England are very ad hoc in terms of their build-up structures, they're all moving around. So you can see Foden on this still here is drifting out wide. We saw Bellingham drifting out in the second half a little bit. Saka can drop in. Because of that, it makes it much easier to exploit these sorts of situations because quote-unquote overcoached teams in these sorts of situations might not actually get the benefit of the Dutch man-to-man system, but because England are so fluid, then they do get that. It reminds me of when Marcelo Bielsa's teams used to play against Frank Lampard or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because Marcelo Bielsa's teams are very man-to-man oriented, and when you have teams that are quite fluid in their possession structure, like Solskjaer and Lampard's, it meant that they really got the benefit of those games because they were just able to pull the structure all apart.
That's why Scott McTominay looks amazing against Leeds.
He's got 2 in half.
Just dances in the middle of the pitch. Yeah, it's great.
This is the first half, right? But I think everyone at home watching noticed the second half, something changed, right? Which changed all of this.
Yeah, I think it was slightly before half time.
What a stupid question. Something
was trying to save
changed.
you
Something
there.
changed. Which changed. I know it was very kind of you to say, but I wish to be naked for the audience, with my dismissal of myself, not in a physical sense, but purely metaphorical.
Metaphysical.
But be naked with me. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it actually happens slightly before the second half. I'd say 35 minutes. That's when Memphis Depay gets injured and they bring on Joey Veerman instead. And I've just got a screenshot here to show the switch that happens. So this is still in the first half, but this is a very. I think when we were running through this, you're like, it's very obviously different from what we were looking at before.
Even just from the still, you can see immediately. It scares me to look at it again. I know the game is over, but I'm scared looking at it.
It's a totally different profile of forward as well. I think Southgate talked about afterwards. Like Depay drops in quite a lot in the midfield, so he puts Veerman on to basically help stop that problem in the midfield, right? Because they were just getting torn apart.
Yeah.
But the big changes here are that we've got two of the midfielders. We've got Schouten here and also Reinders. They've actually swapped sides. Interestingly, I'm interested to know what the reason for that was. Maybe it's just because Foden was dropping out and they would rather have Schouten as the deeper player and Reinders chasing Jude round a bit more. But what we've got now is those two centre midfielders just seeing zonally, right? Before, when I showed you the images of them, they were tight on their men and they were following them wherever they went. Now you can see they're very clearly in the half spaces, making sure that there's not easy space to progress for England there. The other thing that's changed here is that we can see that the wide forwards now have come in much narrower. So England were able to play through the block much more easily in the first 35 minutes. Now you've got Gakpo and I think Xavi Simons now has moved outside. They're going to sit in the lanes here and make sure that the passes into the half space aren't there as well. And what this basically does is it just makes it much harder for England to progress the ball into the Dutch half, and this was the story from this point onwards, is that they were just now much happier to block out the middle, let them around the edges and be like, fine, if you can do anything around the edges of our block, that's fine, but we're not going to let you through the middle. And that was the turning point for me in the game.
It made a big difference in the second half, didn't it, JJ? Which was sort of decidedly less fun, I think, for the neutrals as well as the support. It's scarier for the supporters. Tell me what happened.
Well, lots of things happened in the second half. So Southgate, after the game, was talking about all the tactical changes that Ronald Koeman kept making with his team and how they had to keep changing his own team to deal with it, and particularly in how the Netherlands would build up and how they would defend. So in the second half, England start with more of a back four. They put Luke Shaw in, which is really important to how England play, but also what Netherlands is trying to do. So you can see here, Netherlands start with the same as England, basically a back three with wing backs essentially. But they can all shift at any moment. So this is a back four, essentially, with a 2 and a 2. So they're playing this 4-2-2-2 that Southgate was talking about in the post-match. And trying to build up. And what that does is it leaves an awful lot of space free for this full-back. So when you're playing out from the back, you've got this player free. Now, that would mean that the player who has to close him down is not going to be Bellingham, because they're trying to stop this double pivot getting the ball so they can control the game, because that's what Reinders and Schouten do. And so it had to be Luke Shaw, who has appeared here. Now, here's them doing something different a few moments later. They're now building up in a 3. This is the thing that Southgate's talking about. It's basically the same sort of thing, but you see it's 3-box-3 now. So you've got 4 midfielders there, you've got to get 2 wing backs to give you your width, and there's a striker further up the pitch. But again, it changes the way that England have to press, so that you have to adapt your press in-game to adapt to how the opponent are. So they'll be ready for this, but it's not easy. And then it also means that the right wing back, who's going to be free, has to be marked by Luke Shaw if he has to push up, which would then leave space further up the pitch for someone else. So it's potentially dangerous. This is the same sort of thing. The back 3 becomes a back 2 because Ake, the left back, that left centre back, pushes all the way up. So you've got your 2 in your wide full back, who's now basically level with the right wing back. Lots of different variations in the press, which is how they're able to try and get through England. And I think why they had a bit more of the ball in the second half, because they were able to get through it. But what they're doing out of possession was kind of interesting in the second half as well, because they kept leaving this enormous part of the pitch free. So this sausage shape is like always empty, so that England can constantly progress through it. So I think what we see is the real benefit of playing Foden through the middle and not Bellingham, so he can control the game. So England always shown to this side of the pitch. You can see like where Netherlands are. I mean, it's maybe through a transition and play, but they're always in the sort of left side. They leave England's left free.
It's worth saying that Guéhi is a right-footed left centre-back, right? So that probably comes into the decision somewhat, because I guess the idea then is if you force it to the guy who's not going to necessarily be able to progress the ball really quickly on the left, it will give you more time to get back in.
I thought that because then you know that England aren't going to carry the ball into midfield with the defenders. They just don't do it, especially when they have a 4 now. So then you have like Bellingham. Foden did it a lot as well. Bellingham drops deep to help out with it. But like a really important part of this is that you have Luke Shaw out wide on the left with this giant arrow pointing to him hidden beneath the little thingy there.
A large arrow pointing to a man hidden by smaller arrows.
That's correct. There's lots of arrows here. You have to be really careful.
Widget. I'd call it a widget.
A widget arrow. Yeah.
But like you see things here. So like Bellingham is able to drop in, and Bellingham likes to carry the ball and have lots of touches with it. Foden, we'll talk about him in a bit. Lots of short ones. But you see some of the things that England don't do. So lots of things John was showing with players dropping out of the front line, dragging defenders out the way. To make use of that, because then it just means Kane's on his own in the middle of the pitch, he can get the ball, but there's no one to pass forward to.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Just to go backwards, it becomes U-shaped. What you want, I think, it's not necessarily what you have to do, but I think you want to have runners in behind, because if you had someone who make the run forward, if Bellingham just takes that forward, you can see that having Luke Shaw, remember the giant arrow? If Shaw is here, he's dragged there's a big space between the centre-backs and the player defending the wide space. And that's where you want to get a runner into, but England's so risk-averse. They've also they're stacked on this right-hand side, even though they're playing down the left. It's quite weird, a lot of it.
Do you think people are going to know where Shaw is without that big arrow?
Well, I can't see him anymore. I need the arrow, yeah. But this is the kind of thing they could be doing if they had the runners. So they're sort of halfway to being there, but I think a lot of what the Netherlands were doing made them more comfortable on the ball, so therefore they looked better.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's interesting that you end here, because I'm going to ask you now, John, people have said criticisms about Gareth Southgate.
You've never said that word before.
I've never said that word before. People have said criticisms about Gareth Southgate. He doesn't know what he's doing tactically. You know, I think he gave as you've already mentioned, Jed, he gave a fairly interesting summary of the game tactically afterwards. Whether or not you agree with what he said, part of me wonders whether he's almost done that to prove that, you know, try to show the doubters that he does think about it.
Tell the folks at home.
JJ's analysis here shows, look, here's the opportunities from the second half that they want to exploit. He brings on Ollie Watkins and Cole Palmer, and they exploit just such an opportunity to score the winning goal. Now, of course, it's not so binary as that. But do you think he's got a little tiny bit of an unfair rap this tournament?
In terms of the tactical side of things?
In terms of the criticism
let's talk about the goal itself, because obviously a really nice goal. And when you're bringing on a player like Cole Palmer, who can play the ball through to a player like Ollie Watkins, who can then score a goal like that, then you know what you're doing is you're changing a player profile. So with Kane, I think Kane's had a bad rap this tournament. I think Kane's been better than people say. The reason why Kane is so great is because he drops out, helps with build-up and link-up. The reason why England aren't playing it in behind is not because of Kane. Is because the tactical setup that Southgate has adopted, and we're going to talk about risk aversion later on. Bringing someone like Watkins on and Cole Palmer is basically just rolling the dice and saying, okay, we've tried to win it the way we want to win it. Let's just put different profiles on. We know Watkins are going to run behind, and like in many respects, I think the goal itself was just a really good goal. I thought the Dutch defended it fine. He's beaten a centre back who's pretty tight on him by going slightly back across him and under his foot, and he's beaten a very good goalkeeper. So
the technical part.
You just have to, you just have to accept it. It's like that's what is going to happen with a team like England, who have really good, high-level technical players off the bench. So on the one hand, that's fine. Whether or not that indicates some kind of brilliant tactical move from Southgate is another issue entirely.
That's not what I'm saying. But, yeah.
But interesting. I went and listened to the comments that Southgate made tactically, and it was interesting. But it struck me as someone who was sort of had been told what to say about how the game unfolded. It was kind of like, we started off building in a 3 and we decided to go for a 4. They started off building in a 4 and decided to go to a 3. We changed things up. They put a box midfield in the middle. He's just talking about the structures of what sort of happened. He didn't really talk about like why. Why did they change things up? Why did it become harder in the second half? So I would maybe have wanted to hear a little bit more of that. But he's not the tactics guy, right? He's just the guy who fronts everything up. And we've talked a lot at length, I think, in other shows where, you know, the big part of what Southgate has done has been off the pitch and a lot of the man management stuff as well. So that doesn't bother me too much. But in terms of the tactics of this game, I think a lot of people are reading too much into it off the back of the result. Because
everyone's reading too much into the entirety of international tournaments. Sure. I mean, like, isn't that like a... I know... I think the fundamental question we're seeking to answer here, because it's the question being asked in the nation this morning, you know, and throughout the last couple of weeks, is are they good or lucky, right? And like, it isn't just a foundational level. I know it makes a mockery of what we're doing now, but like, surely the conclusion from everything that we're saying here is that this is international football. This is different to domestic football, and everyone reads too much into it, right?
Yeah, but this is the thing that England, you can't take away that the draw has been very, very favourable to them.
Sure.
So, like, I mean, in the past they've gone out quite early in tournaments, but they've gone out to teams like Argentina and Brazil, not in the Euros. That would be a surprise if that were to happen.
Yeah.
But
How did they get here?
Well, exactly. That seems unfair. But they've gone out to those really good teams in the past because they get them early in the draw. If they had Spain in the quarterfinals, there's every chance they get dunted there. So that's kind of the problem. I think.
But isn't that just how football works? I mean,
sort of, but then the thing, they're a little bit like, it's almost like Real Madrid in a way. Like they've got really good individual players.
Yeah.
I think there's things that aren't like Real Madrid, and like the balance is wrong for a lot of it. And I think certain players aren't the same wavelengths. And I think some of the stuff he's stumbled upon, maybe accidentally, Bellingham being shipped out to the left because of the way their game was moving gave more room to Foden against Netherlands.
He did talk about individual players making solutions on the pitch as well.
Yeah.
There was one example which was, I think in the beginning, Saka and Walker were marking Gakpo and it would have been Reinders who was pushing up. And because Reinders was playing as an outside centre midfielder, I think they thought, well, Saka can just come across and cover him. But he ended up in possession becoming almost like a 10. And so it meant that Saka was ending up like deeper than Walker at times because Walker was then going across to Gakpo. So they just decided between the two of them to switch marking responsibilities and they fixed it. I think people read a bit too much into that, and I think people read a bit, because obviously that's what brilliant players do. If you realise that this is pointless, why am I ending up as a deeper player out of possession when I'm supposed to be the higher player in possession? That sort of thing is like you would expect a good player to do.
You can't hear the manager. Like you can't hear those instructions. They're too detailed. Everyone else has to know them as well. You can just do it between you there.
I think as well that indicates that maybe they're not getting as much tactical instructions as some of the other players are getting for the teams where the coaches are perceived to be tacticians as well.
But then there's like the argument between like the freedom of creativity and choice of what you want to do on the pitch and whether that benefits individual players, which it almost certainly does. But you need to have structure around it that facilitates that to work in the first place. And like feeding into all the stuff that Southgate's done off the pitch with what you see on it. The reason I think they play better when they play with the three at the back is because it gives them a bit of safety in numbers in certain parts of the pitch, so they'll occasionally make the braver pass forward.
Be a bit riskier.
Yeah, and they'll occasionally make it, and then they open up, and that's when they start to look okay. But if they play with the two, it's too scary to do it, and so they don't push the full-back to actually go forward. I mean, Trippier's not really... And then you see personnel stuff, Trippier doesn't want to push forward because of other reasons.
Yeah.
And so it slows them down, and so they feel held back. But when they've had to get over the line, some players just have stepped up, and you can't... It's not tactics, it just sort of happens.
I think the game itself is like a really interesting microcosm of that, right? Because in the first half, when they were playing a way that suited them, being like quite flexible, because they were playing against a man-to-man out of possession system, they looked okay. But then the problem was, and that's the whole freedom thing that people love to talk about all the time. Oh, players need to be more free. Sure, in a man-to-man system, that's worked fine. As soon as the Dutch switched and became more zonal, England just didn't have the same kind of edge, right? And that's the worry for me, is that you can talk about this and we can talk about all of the tactical things that Southgate's done, but the reality is that it was the other coach, it was Koeman, who we are very critical of as well, and in the tactical community as a tactician, who actually made the changes which changed the flow of the game.
Sure.
The reality is that even in that situation, England then went on and got the goal that won it for them, and that's been the story of their tournament. But in the moments when England were actually the better team, they didn't actually create a huge amount outside the penalty as well, right? So I think that tactics obviously always matter, but the players also always matter as well. England have the players; they were given a platform to be able to do their thing, and they've done it. But there's been a few games this tournament where I think the tactical balance has swung in favour of the opponents, and England have won anyway, and that's why people are saying, have they been lucky, right?
I would say as well, I think the interesting thing about this is, you mentioned before, we've talked about Southgate a lot previously, we've talked about perhaps some of the more important stuff that's happened being off the pitch as well. It's difficult for fans or neutral observers or whatever, viewers to really dig into that when you can't see it. I think it's easy for us to sit here and say, oh, he should have brought Cole Palmer on sooner, or he should start Ollie Watkins in the final. We'll come talk about that later. It's easy for me to do that from the pub. It's not possible for me to go, when he delivered that difficult news to Trent Alexander-Arnold, he should have sat down next to him so that he didn't feel an inferiority complex, or he should have been more sensitive and nuanced in the way that he dealt with that difficult social dynamic that we can't see and don't know about. So I think one of the things that frustrates me about it, the conversation, the narrative around Southgate generally, is that the very visible stuff, the stuff that's easy for us to get to grips with and have a conversation about as analysts or as members of the public, is not the strong suit. And the thing that he does really well is the thing that's really hard and requires more nuance than most people are prepared to give or are capable of giving in the middle of a tetchy European Championship semi-final, are capable of giving. So I think that's one of the reasons that he gets a bad rap. I agree with everything that you've both said. 2 finals in 4 tournaments is outstanding, and in the spirit of looking at the success over the longer run, it is. I mean, he's by far the most successful England manager in doing the maths in my head in 60 years, right? I mean, it's like there's no one even comes close. Can you think of someone who you would say would come in and immediately do a better job? Because there's plenty of managers who have far more glittering and successful domestic records that have failed in international football.
And yet, a lot of the fans were talking about him leaving.
I know, it's crazy. That's what I'm saying. I'm not
what do you
saying
think? What do you think? I agree. I do agree
Yeah.
with you. But how would you respond to the fact that a lot of fans have watched what's happened so far, certainly up until the last couple of games, and been like, we need to get rid of him, right? There must be...
I would say it's complete insanity, and it's stupid, and it needs to stop. And if they don't stop it, I'll stop them.
If they'd have been knocked out by Slovakia, which they were like...
Oh, I'd been on board with it. Get rid of them.
Well, that's the problem. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't have. I'd like to think that I could take... I tweeted at the beginning of this tournament after watching that first game. And it's hard for, I'm a big England fan, you know this, right? But I tweeted saying, I don't think they're going to win. I don't think that it's the first tournament in 3 that I've not thought after game 1 we could win the tournament. Ironically, England are going to be in the final, right? But based on that performance, that's why I thought. I felt that after the last tournament, when Southgate took that 2 weeks to consider what he was going to do. Part of me questioned at the beginning of this tournament, was that the right time to go? It was like an incredible legacy by that point. What he keeps saying in his post-match press conferences, I know it's part of the line, he keeps saying, I wanted to improve English football. In terms of results and standing, and in terms of having a team whereby they have a mentality where they're capable of performing well in tournaments, they don't crumble under pressure, they're quite tournament savvy, as I think is a term that's been used to describe them. That's a success. So part of me kind of wanted him not to go to this tournament. But 2 finals in 4 tournaments, it's super impressive. And I honestly think, when you look back in 10, 20 years' time, that's all that will be said about him. Like, I don't think anyone will remember how boring the football has been at times. But,
people love Graham Taylor, and he wasn't a particularly impressive England manager. At least with Southgate, you've got that record of getting deep in tournaments, and that's what people want from tournaments, right? People want the moments. We can talk all we want about the causality of this, and the problem is that people always tie way too much causality to results. And England could have been knocked out in the round of 16, right? And that doesn't really matter. It doesn't change anything. It's just that now the fans have had a few really nice, crazy turnarounds at the end of games, and who cares? It doesn't say anything about him as a tactician or a coach or anything, but it's also like the memory. That's what people want, right?
Well, and what it does show, the thing that was so nice for me about last night was, and there's a couple of things. I've been watching them with my wife. She doesn't really watch football, so it's been interesting. I'm sitting at home watching them, and she'll occasionally ask a question, who's that? Or, when Ollie Watkins scored last night, she said, oh, that's a good goal. I said, yes, yes, it is a good goal. But, afterwards you see the final whistle blows, Harry Kane rushes over and hugs Ollie Watkins, right? The relationship that Southgate seems to have with all of the players, despite how brutal some of the selection choices ahead of this tournament have been, the squad genuinely seem to like and support each other. They almost exist in a bubble. He seems to have really well shielded them from all of the
they played bad football for the first 3 games, and so it gave them a really great sense of siege mentality.
But the point for me is I watch Ollie Watkins, who's had a terrific season, Aston Villa player, come on in a semi-final and score a goal like that.
He was playing in the 6th tier 10 years ago. It's like an incredible story.
But what it means to him to then go and hug his family afterwards, I don't care if we win in the final. That's just, don't you think that's wonderful? I'm sorry, I know Scotland didn't have those opportunities, but if in the group stages, if there'd been a moment like that and you watch Scott McTominay score a goal and hug his family afterwards, you think that's what it's about, isn't it? Isn't that what it's about?
I think so. I think even at club football and international football, you kind of want your team to represent what you want, right? So you want it to represent you.
Yeah.
So I think if you imagine, or not imagine, but remember back to when England were dreadful and then they managed to get all the way to the semis in the World Cup, whatever, right? So you have to remember what the the thought was like they were all over the place. Wayne Rooney retired.
You talk about the golden generation, no, after that.
No, I mean like after that.
The Iceland era.
Yeah, like after Iceland. So it's all over the place. Southgate comes and fixes it. We've been through it 1,000 times, right? But there's all this stuff happened. He fixed all that stuff. And then gradually the nation started to fall in love with their boys again because they were just useless, it was a toxic environment about it, and it was quite funny to the outsiders. Now, he turned them into a team that was not only likeable to outsiders, but also quite good. It worked all of a sudden, and a lot of that is to do with off-pitch stuff. It just suddenly worked altogether. He made it seem like a real honour, a real prestige to play for the England national team, and not some sort of thing you have to do on the side, because actually what really matters is trying to win the league for whatever club you're playing for. And so then they become this structured kind of unit, and then they go to the Euros, they reach the final, and they lose to the first really good team, whatever, all the things you're going to say, right? But then that's that. So then the expectation sort of goes up, because the expectation was really low. Now it's sort of up here, and some people before the tournament had decided that England had already won it before there.
I think they were odds favourites.
Yeah, exactly. So even the book is like, oh, they're going to win, and everyone's saying, oh, they're already going to win. Not everyone, obviously. A lot of people were still sceptical, and they still have the bit of pessimism in them. But then you reset your expectations when they start playing terribly. And then that's where the benefit of a really lucky draw comes in, when you play against teams who you should beat anyway. They have amazing players. They have some of the best players in the entire world. Sometimes it's hard to get them to work together as a unit, but then the performances aren't quite there. But the problem is you have amazing players you think should be doing much better, but also the players aren't playing the way you want. Everyone wants to play forward and play attacking football. They want to play like Spain do. And Spain play with real bravery. They take risks on the ball. And they're inspired. It's entertaining and quite inspiring. Like, wow, how are they doing this? This is amazing. This is top tier football. Whereas England look like a team who aren't top tier. They look like a good.
They look like a tournament team.
A tournament team, and they could easily win it. Easily win it. But it's not like there's not one right way of doing any of this at all.
Isn't the point though that people think, well, Spain have got the best players and they're playing the best football. England have the best players as well. Should they not also be? And again, I'm not going to make that argument, but the whole point of tournament football isn't that we rank which team is best, right? Because if we did that, we could just do that before the tournament. This is the team that we think is the best one.
Ironically, I know we're about to talk about Spain, but if we did that before the tournament, I don't think Spain would have been first. But
I totally agree with you. But I think that's the thing. We can sit here as analysts and break stuff down till the cows come home.
And we will.
And we will, And that's what we're supposed to do, and people find enjoyment in that. But when it comes to an international tournament, in theory they do. Fans of the team that we're not talking about.
They're still talking about a bald head in the chat some 30 minutes later.
Really?
I mean,
that's to inspire.
It's pretty entertaining in there as well.
But my point is rather like, I think the problem with these sorts of tournaments is that people want, on the one hand, people just don't care. Like, you just want your team to win, right? By whatever means. And sometimes there's more satisfaction in scabbing results, right? To an extent. The reason why you want your team to play well is because it makes it more likely that you're going to win the next game. But who cares if you win the game? So the point is that
that's what Seb Stafford-Bloor said. He said he wants England to win the final after their worst performance, and he'll find that the funniest.
And so on the one hand, I want to be like, okay, I'm going to tell you about why I don't think England have been the best team this tournament. But like on the other hand, none of the audience wants to hear that, because they want to go into the game on Sunday and think, they've got a good chance of doing well here. So all I'm going to do is bring misery to people. But at the end of the day, it literally doesn't matter what I think about England, because they've proven that they can win these games with moments, and they've done it.
And listen, you bring misery to me on a daily basis, and I still love you.
Aspect.
Now we should talk about Spain at some point. España,
locals say.
Let's start by saying beautiful country, wonderful football. Oh, it's terrifying and awe. If you lived in the year 2000 BC and you came upon a wonder, you saw a huge mountain. I don't know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Something that inspires.
But you're thinking of the wonders now.
I'm thinking of I'm thinking of civilization. I'm thinking of you see something a wonder. The true definition of the word awesome, awe-inspiring. And let me just, after what a great question that was, let me check that I'm going to John with this one.
Oh, are we?
Awe-inspiring, John, about this Spanish team. A terrifying prospect for England. They've been terrific, haven't they? But there's something a little different about them. They're not quite the Spain that we remember of that kind of Barcelona Guardiola era, 2010. They're a little different, aren't they? What is it?
It's interesting you say that, because I think what we mean when we say that Spanish football now tends to mean this really patient build-up approach. I think early Guardiola was was maybe a little bit more similar to this than people might like to admit.
I agree.
The big difference is, right, we had Luis Enrique last time round, and it just felt really stodgy. We had Rodri being played as a centre-back, which is just...
Sure.
Yeah, it's just
not marked down in your book.
No,
absolutely not.
And it was, they controlled possession in games and ended up losing. And then they came into this tournament and everyone was kind of like, who's this guy, Luis de la Fuente? We don't really know him. He's been through the youth systems in the Spanish national system. No one really knows anything. We don't expect anything from him because we all know Luis Enrique, PSG manager, took them a long way in the Champions League. Surely it's a step down to this guy.
He doesn't know the tournament.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But what he's done is he's actually made Spain a little bit more, I'd say, variable. They've got a little bit more of an edge to them than maybe they've had in the past because they've got Lamine Yamal, they've got Nico Williams, who offer incredible transition ability, incredible 1v1 ability against fullbacks. So we've seen so many games in the tournament so far when you've got oppositions. Chelsea apparently they're playing, just doubling up on them, right? And in a game like football where you have a limited amount of players, and if you can end up with a player advantage, if you're getting defenders to double up on someone like this, it means that there's going to be space somewhere else or a free player somewhere else that can be exploited. Yeah. And so what it's done is it's given us like a real nice mix of Spain are still a possession-based side, but they don't need to play like that if they don't want. If they're struggling a little bit to maintain possession, they can sit a bit deeper and then hit in transition. They're pressing high as well. They've just got everything right. And as we say all the time in domestic football, it's the teams that have solutions in every phase of play that are the really dangerous ones. And I think that's why Spain are such a frightening prospect.
That's exactly what I think of it. It's why I think they're the elite. They're the best one. In that, exactly what John's saying there. Also, what you'll notice from Spain is that they go forward. They always go forward. They are happy to put it long into space. There's a team instruction on Football Manager called "Pass into Space." They definitely have that on because you can make these players push up. But when they're often quite left heavy. They lean on the left. Kukuri overlaps as well. What you get is lots of forward passes, and they follow up with a press, like a counter press, and they'll try and win the ball that way. You get France. France sat pretty deep against them, and they just forced the ball forward, so they kept going at them. And then once you start doing that, the other team drops even deeper because they're a bit scared. And then you start having players like Laporte, who will happily carry the ball out from the back into midfield and give you an overload. You've got Fabian Ruiz, who's been the best player in the tournament for me so far. Yeah. Unbelievable in little tight spaces. You've got him, Rodri, Olmo, Yamal, all incredible in tight spaces. Pass the ball into them, they can go around you and do all that. Yeah. But then they'll just use possession for purpose. So they'll use it to give themselves a bit of a breather. Let the opposition come out to them so they can then go forward. There's one way I think you can hit them. It's when they will push the ball forward and they'll chase it, and when they all push up to chase the ball for the counter press, if you just leave someone, another Chelsea player here, if you leave someone up here and you get the ball,
Jackson would be good.
He would be very good at this.
Yeah.
Anyone wide and pacey, because when they'll all shift this way when they push the ball up, and the goalie Jordan Pickford will be playing for England.
Wide and pacey. That was my nickname at school.
That's correct. Yes. And then wide and pacey goalkeeper could knock it long into this space here, so they couldn't be caught in that transitional moment. But that's the only possible weakness I can see them.
And that's going to be the one.
It could be,
the one.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because what I see with Spain is they have what we call a hybrid press, which is this idea that they're going to sit in a 4-4-2 block out of possession. So you have Yamal out here and Olmo in it. So it's like a 4-4-2. They'll drop into that 4-4-2 shape, but when the opposition are building up, they jump player for player. It's really quite aggressive. So everyone gets up high, and the problem is that they do have a tendency then to leave space in this kind of area, which I think this is the issue with hybrid pressing is that it's because you're using predictable jumps, and in certain situations you can actually trigger a lot of these scenarios. So you can be like, we know that we're going to play it to the centre back on this side, they're going to jump in this way, and they're probably going to end up leaving a player free on the far side.
It's almost always a really risky pass.
Yeah,
so you sort of do it on purpose to give them
exactly.
the option.
The idea is it's much harder for you to find that player in a dangerous scenario.
They let Mbappe free almost the entire of the France game. He was almost always free.
So you force them if they have a dangerous player, force them to build up on the other side, leave that area a little bit under defended, but you're going to get away with it because of the amount of time it's going to take for them to actually exploit that. It's not going to be a problem. The issue we've been talking about with England is that they don't progress the ball quickly enough. They don't play dangerous passes right. So I would think that this kind of approach would be exploitable, but the problem with England is that they're not going to do it in a way that avoids Spain just falling back into their low block again later on. The other weakness, I would say...
Moments, John.
Moments will do it. But the other thing I think they're maybe a little bit weak on is that when they go a goal up, they have a tendency to just sit in a little bit too deep and then give the initiative to the opponent. And I think that will play into England's hands if they are a goal down with minutes to play, because they won't need to worry about ball progression, which has been the issue for England all tournament. They'll have the opportunity to have those moments. So.
Well, I can show specifically that by comparing, with show England and Spain the ball progression stuff.
Is this the special bit that comes after the big Spain flag?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question, give you enough time to get that up while the camera's on me and not on the thing.
Well, let's do this smoothly.
And that question would take a certain amount of time, and it would say, now there is one player that you've referenced before, JJ, a player who I think could be in the Spain team from the England team. You're there now. I don't have to.
Yeah, it's good.
I realised the lion's pink on the Spain flag. Did not realise that.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Neon pink.
That's nice. I don't know if I'd call that neon, but I would call it pink.
I'm a bit colourblind, so.
Are you?
Yeah.
Colourblind and bald. What a shame. What
It's
a
been
shame.
a struggle. It's been
That's
a struggle.
very rude, wasn't it? That was too rude. Would you say that was too rude?
Potentially, but it doesn't matter, and we can move on.
Phil Foden's an England player that I think he could be in the Spain team. Good and bad, JJ, for what you're about to tell me.
Well, I think Phil Foden shows exactly loads of the problems that England have, just in personnel and tactics, but also the difference between why Spain are so good and what you'll probably see against England. And so Phil Foden embodies all of it for me. Love a bit of Phil Foden. So as I was saying before, like Bellingham's been shunted out to the left side, less involved in the play. Bellingham takes loads and loads of touches, slows everything down, I think. We put him to the middle, it has to be all about him, otherwise I think things break down and you lose what Foden brings to you. Because what you'll see is Foden will bring the ball out, get to a certain area, realize he has no passes, I'll just go back here. When he gets to this area, he looks up, he hasn't got any real forward passes on, there's no one really free. There are players there, but they're not free, it's not a good choice. So he turns back round, Bellingham should be further up, and Foden knows this and starts waving his hands at him, going, you should be over further up. Bellingham acknowledges it, says hi. There we go. So
he says, you should be further up.
If Bellingham had been where he's supposed to be further up, the pass would have been on from Foden, they could have kept going forwards. Foden's looking for that pass, but he waits, and everything slows down. But whether this is just them taking a bit of a break, resting, you don't know. But here is Foden looking for the kind of pass that Spain regularly play that would break lines and open up a team in like one pass, take you straight through. So here he is circled in the middle. Now you'll see, I think it's Kyle Walker's on the ball over there, right? So what happens here is this pass is on, he can make this pass. If he does, Foden is good enough to take that on the turn and drive with it, and you're going to be in a bit of fun if you do. But he doesn't. Instead, Rice moves blindside of the striker, and the ball's played into Rice. So it's a safe pass, right? Now, when Rice looks up, what he can see is that these are his options, because he's scanned, he looks, that's what you see. 3 options. Menu is tight. You've got Saka out here. That's not a good pass either. Kane is man marked. There's no real option here. So Rice kind of has to take a touch and turn. That's the only thing he can do in this situation because of the positioning. They could drop further in and create more. Maybe Menu drops in. There's options you could do, but it's the second half of the game. Maybe slow down a bit. Now Rice takes the ball, looks up. Foden moves slightly to his left. This pass is on. If he takes that, Foden can take it on the turn, and he has all these options. They are behind the midfield line. They have 4v3, 4v4 basically, and they can just run at them. That's what Spain would do, but they do it slightly earlier. But they don't. Rice takes his time, slows it down. Look, Foden goes again. What are you doing? He puts his hands out because he can see the whole pattern's opened up in front of him. You can see how he can get through that.
And can I say, playing for Pep Guardiola Manchester City team, coming to play in this team, I think there would be moments where you'd go, what?
Well, exactly. Is it technical or is it bravery?
It's what happens when you get given freedom, right? Rice is given the freedom to not make that pass, and he doesn't make it.
And we had a very interesting philosophical conversation about freedom once before, didn't we? But
is that risk? Is it risk averse, or is it because they're told not to make the pass? Because Foden clearly wants it, right? But if you do make the pass, this is the benefit you get. So here is Rice on the ball now. He looks up. Now Foden is tight to this player here. You'll see they've got a slight kind of overload in the right side because you've got Walker's overlapped, right? But Foden drops. The player kind of tracks him. Rice plays the ball to Foden, but he's pointing because he knows that Walker is the free player on the side. So oftentimes you'll think in football, because the player is free, that's the one you should pass to. But I think no. The really good players can receive in tight spaces and take others out of the game. Like you play a bounce pass. You'll see it in five-side a lot. People always go to the one who's free. But then if you do that, if you pass to the one who's free, like if he makes this pass here, what instead will happen is that you'll have players who can go tight to him, close it down, the move breaks down, it has to go backwards. That's what happens if you go too early. It's all about timing and decision making. So instead, because Foden has the ball and is really good at football, and he trusts his touch, and like the best players can. Like you see Spain, all those players are amazing on the ball, touching it. So if Foden takes it on the turn, he turns, goes past him, and suddenly now Kyle Walker is completely free on the side, so you can play the pass into him, which then means that Saka is not then looked after, because Ake has to go across now to deal with it. Because Ake has to go across, it means that Saka is now free in the middle, and that goal's just offside, right? So that, I mean, it's a really good goal.
Yeah.
But that's an example, if you play that pass and rely on what Foden's seeing rather than what everyone else is seeing around him, it's better. And I can, what is this one here? Oh, this is an example. The reason they don't do this, so exactly why they don't, it's not technical levels, because if Rice plays this pass and gets it slightly wrong and Foden misses it, what would happen is that Netherlands would just run straight at you, and England don't like that. They're not very good at dealing with this in transition, and I think Spain will do that an awful lot. They'll run at them an awful lot in the next game.
It's certainly going to be a spooky game.
It could be a very spooky game.
I think it will be. I'd like to hear from you, and perhaps you want to get the tactics board up for this bit,
Yes.
what you think England should be doing in this game. My instinct is that you're going to say they should favour a 3 at the back. You seem to think that they look better in that.
I think for various reasons they're better with a 3. They could either do that. I could show you what Spain do that England can try and play on, and why they play the way they want to.
Sure.
So I think a lot of what England will do will be based on how Spain play rather than, they'll be more pragmatic, I think. So like here, for example, the exact difference between what do you want to have?
I was trying to gesture to him. I was like, maybe he can change it to the tactics board in the background.
You want the tactics board here?
He wants the pictures.
I want to show you.
Oh,
this,
you still want the pictures?
I like the pictures.
I'm an attentive colleague.
Yeah.
We're still on the pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, please carry on with
No,
the.
it's fine.
with
Well,
the-
it's related
with
to
the
what we're talking
pictures.
about, because exactly off the back of what Foden does, this is what Spain do. They will happily have the ball in the opposition half. So England will probably have to deal with this quite a lot of the time. They'll have to drop back like France did. France similar? Do you say they're kind of similar to England in certain regards to how they'd set up?
Yeah.
Like, but probably sit off them a bit. So
don't press as high. So
yeah,
this
exactly.
is like a bit more mid-blocky, right?
So they'll drop back like this, and Spain will have the ball. And what you get with Spain is that they will make the risky pass that England won't. So this is Nacho, who's Real Madrid centre back. He's not really a ball-playing player, but he can do this. He fizzes this ball in to Dani Olmo, who is surrounded. So imagine
Crisp pass, you would say.
a
Right?
crisp pass, yes, along the ground. Now, what you'll see with this pass is that if this does not go well into Olmo here, there are 3 amazing players, like these 3 across, who can go in the counter-attack and go at them. This is the risk and reward that Spain get. So by playing this pass, it's very risky. If it bounces loose, which it might do if someone receives it and can't control it, you're in trouble. But Olmo not only takes it in without dropping it, he then turns past the midfielders, they're past the line, keep going forward. The ball will eventually drop loose. But then again, you look at this French defence, the entire of the French defence is in this weird shape.
That's not quite a sausage, is it? That's more of a shoe.
I think it's a manta ray.
A manta ray.
Yeah, without its tail. But a very small one. And
Yeah.
so they're all here. That can be easily exploited by just shifting your hips and your shoulders a little bit, and then you can ping one in from 30 yards, which you can't really cater for.
It's not surprised the keeper didn't read that flight, is it? It's like-
No. It's a very unpredictable flight of the ball.
Oh, we've had some goals, haven't we?
Yes, but then this is the thing. So like Spain will do that. They will play those sorts of passes. So we go and look at the actual teams here. They play with risk, and they'll keep doing it against England. But England, I think, will try and play mostly. They'll want them to play in the counter. If I were the Spain manager, you'd probably try and give England the ball, because if you give them the ball, they'll make the errors. Like they are. We've seen them. They're not great at build up. So like Spain will show them one side. I'd imagine they'll probably try and show them to the left side of the pitch here. Netherlands left that completely open, right? So you let them play down the left, and they'll just try and snap onto them a certain part of midfield. Menu, Rice, Bellingham, depends how they play it, whatever they want to do. But I think they'll set up to try and let England have the ball, come out a little bit, and then snap on them, because they have these fast lads that can do all the damage, and they're so good that they. Like Williams can maybe one of the only players on the planet that can beat Kyle Walker.
I was going to
race.
say, I wonder if having Kyle Walker as an asset for England in this sense, because Williams is very fast. But no,
well, I think that's why you play a 3, because you give you a bit of safety. So you probably play a 3. So let's take out, who am I taking out here?
This is what I was going to ask actually, and for John to be involved in. Well, carry on doing this, but like I'd love to know between the two of you what you think the lineup will be. I don't think it'll be too hard to predict, because it's been pretty similar throughout the tournament so far. Injuries dependent, of course, because Trippier, I know, picked up a bit of a knock in the last game. Do you think this is what it will look like as well, John?
I think personnel-wise, yeah, with the exception that it could be Shaw again instead of Trippier.
Sure.
I don't think that's. I think there's problems with both of those options, right? Shaw, I think Shaw's looked very unfit, surprisingly for a
he
guy.
Probably is.
Yeah, who's not played very much and is coming back from injury, arguably rushed back from injury. And then if Trippier, as we've said, is a right-footed, left-sided player in this setup. So I don't know. I think maybe. For me, I think what Spain will try and do is possess the ball as much as possible. I agree that the scenarios where you think you've got such fast lads, like why not just yeet the ball in behind.
The point is that they can do it whenever they want to, right? They can
change
I guess.
Phase, But I think the worry that they'll have is, as we've seen, England can play like toilet and still produce a moment. So if you're giving them the ball more, you're increasing the likelihood of them having those moments.
Yes.
So I think that what Spain will try and do.
Toilet.
Yes.
Okay, right. I wasn't. I thought he said. Did he say toilet? I was like, who's toilet?
It's exactly it's the point I wanted to make. It's exactly it. Like you don't you give them the ball, so then they'll make the mistake. But also you want to have the ball because you can force all the errors. But also, someone will do something.
Well, I think they will. They'll definitely press high. They'll definitely try and cause problems for England's build-up. The big question is whether or not England can get through those first phases of build-up and then maybe exploit the aggressive press that they have.
Yeah.
But then this comes back to what we were saying before about risk aversion. If you're not going to, it's fine to be risk averse if you're slowly building up and able to retain possession. That's exactly what Man City do under Pep Guardiola increasingly over the last few years. The difference here is that if you get through those first few lines of pressure, which I think is going to be hard anyway because it's a good press, you then have to exploit the conditions that you've created and by being risky and playing quickly. And if they aren't willing to do that, then maybe they won't get the upside from that. So
I don't think England can press them high. I don't think they can.
I think England's high press will get played around. It's not been very good this tournament.
Yeah,
so
I don't think they'll even risk it. I think they'll just try.
They'll just sit deeper.
Yeah, I think they'll probably start.
Try and hit on the break.
Maybe mid block. I don't know. I think you try and engage them. I don't know what line I can draw here, but you probably want to engage Spain. They'll just. Kane will try and he'll stand around and make them. He'll look slow, make them build up and whatever. But they don't engage them until they can reasonably make sure that they're nice and compact. If you play a high line going behind.
Kane v Spain is going to mainly stay on this plane here.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Also, you have to worry about the doubling up. So you're going to have Carvajal basically plays as an extra winger. Carvajal plays as an extra winger. Yamal will come inside. Cucurella will go inside or outside of Williams. So this is your wide areas. You've got to deal with that. So if you play Saka, certainly you're losing him on the break because what do you do with him? Where do you play Foden? Do you play him in the middle where he was actually amazing and controlled the game and is one of the only players that can actually see the line breaking passes around him, whether receiving or making them? Where do you put Bellingham? He takes lots of touches. That he might be the winner because he'll score some mad 30-yarder or something like that.
Well, this is my final question because we're going to wrap up. We've been fortunate today to do this without producer Chris in the room, so we've gone much longer than Chris would have let us. Sorry, Chris, watching at home. But I know now's the time. This is perhaps a question framed, and you'll forgive me, for me. We go into this game understanding Spain will be the favourites, perhaps marginal, but they are the favourites. They've definitely looked the better team in the tournament so far. I don't think anyone would be surprised if they won the game, but will there be any sense of worry from the Spanish side? What will they look at England and think, is this perhaps a team that they don't really want to play, having just gone through France and Germany?
It's momentum, isn't it?
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
What do you think they'll be thinking looking at England? Because right now we're facing the other way.
I think if you go into this game 1-0 up, going into the last 10, 15 minutes against England, you're just like, well, anything can still happen.
We're back in the toilet
right?
again.
Yeah, and if all it takes is one moment to score, and then suddenly you're into extra time, and it's like, oh, here we go again. They won't lie down. So, and that counts for something in these sorts of games. Like England have gone down in games so many times this tournament and come back. So the Spanish will not feel safe, I don't think, unless they've got a big buffer going into the last few minutes of the game. So the big question is going to be whether or not they're going to be risky throughout the game in order to try and get that buffer before the final few moments, or whether or not they're going to be willing to just sit on a 1-goal lead, right? If it happens that way.
They play with so much confidence as well. I don't think you see. Maybe it's just feeling like the England players more because you see them all the time or something. But I think they play with a lot of bravery and confidence and less pressure on them, almost in a way.
It's the same with Real Madrid, right? Real Madrid, they always know, oh, well, we've come back from this before, so it just gives you the ability to continue playing without giving up, right? And that's giving up. Like, it's so easy for any player when it's just like, oh, here we go again, right? And England are on the right side of that needle when it comes to, here we go again. We know how this story ends.
And they also don't really create anything in open play, so you can rely. Like, England are going to be really good at set pieces. Like, the way I would see it, if you're being quite cynical, would be that England won't get any chances really unless it's on the break for something. It's about like some loose pass that one of the Spanish players won't make, or a corner, something like that. That's how they'll end up scoring, and England will probably score in like the first 8 minutes, all hyped up from a corner.
I think that would be bad. In fact, Jack Pittbrook...
And then Spain will pick them apart for the rest of the game.
Yeah, Jack Pittbrook said this on a recent Athletic FC podcast. He said the thing he really hopes that doesn't happen is that a Luke Shaw scores in the first 2 minutes again, because it will make the game really boring.
England's best chance is being equal for most of the game, and then something
1-0
mad happening
behind.
in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, I agree.
And then like Bellingham pops up, or you stick Cole Palmer on, he dribbles past 8 players or something.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, we're going to make it more formal, of course, because we are playing points are bad throughout this tournament.
Oh yes.
The scores are, I'm going to tell you, as such. You're in joint last place now after your 4-1 Holland prediction.
Oh yes,
yesterday.
that was a mistake.
4-1 Netherlands, sorry. You and Seb both share on 95 points. Seb's picked first for this game. He's gone for Spain 2, England 0. So what do you think?
Well, who's winning? John is winning.
John is on 85 points. He's 10 ahead of you. You could meme select, not in the spirit of the game, but it's the final, so I think we would allow it if you want to. However, I want you to look into your camera if you do this and say, you will not claim afterwards that I only beat you because of your memeing at the end, okay? That's the exception. Or you pick what you think the score's actually going to be, which is maybe what the chat would want to hear.
Yeah, so there's a 10-point gap I need to make up.
Yeah, and there's a 5-point gap I need to make up. So, I mean, John's basically won already.
I'm trying to think what I think the actual score will be, and then I should go the opposite way, so then that would be how I could possibly win it.
Yeah? You need to go the opposite way of what he will say. Here's what we should do. Let's punish him and make him pick now, so that he can't match
what if he picks what I want? What does Seb pick?
If he picks what you want, then you're going to have to pick something 10 goals away from that. All right, do it. Tell me what you think is actually going to happen. Just do it that way.
What did Seb say?
Seb said 2-0 Spain.
2-0 Spain. I mean, there's no point doing the funny answer because they're not going to win 10-0.
No, they're not going to.
So there's no point doing.
You're too far away.
The reason I'm not doing the funny bit is because there's no reason. Like John's won, but I will win the entire game if I win this correct score.
Sure.
And England will take the lead within 8 minutes from a corner, and then Spain will pick them apart for probably 2.
You're tempted to say 3-1. I can hear it.
I'm going to say 3-1.
Yeah, I can hear the 3-1. It's
You're
right there.
going to say 2-1. You're going to say, no, maybe 1-0 England.
No,
John was fully switched back to being England pro again. Like, this is what's happened.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying 3-0 England. John?
I'll say 2-1 Spain.
2-1 Spain. Okay, so interestingly enough, there is enough difference in our scores. If it was 3-1 England, I'm 5 away from you. I could still
draw. You said
draw.
3-0, didn't you?
3-0 England. That's what I meant to say. Sorry. Yeah, it's been a. Chris is right. We should finish the live streams 20 minutes earlier. Anyway, one more thing for me to tell you before we go home. We're back for one final live stream on the evening of the final, which I believe is the 14th. That's this coming Sunday.
It's Sunday.
Wherever you are in the world watching this now, when the game is finished, we shall arrive in our own sweet time, but probably 15 to 30 minutes after that. And we'll join you either. I will either be celebrating or commiserating or somewhere in the middle, and we'll give a little bit of analysis before we go on some holidays. But thank you for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of your week. Before the finals, a thank you from JJ.
Hello.
And a thank you from John. A thank you from Don Marr over there, who panicked halfway through when the OBS crashed. Yeah, there he is. And from Jamie, who's moderating all the comments, deleting all the absolutely horrific things that some of you have said. And thanks to producer Chris for staying at home. We'll be back on Sunday. Until then, ta-ra, bye-bye.